I am Shayna Weber with the Emerging Screenwriters interview series. This episode is all about Trey Epps. Trey is a multifaceted creator, screenwriter. He has lots of experience in the industry in different areas. So we talked about that. We laughed a lot. Trey came on our radar because he was part of our diversity initiative and has since landed on the top 25 screenwriters to watch in 2023. I hope Trey entertains you in this interview as much as he entertained me. Thanks. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I could not be better. So happy to be talking to you.
Really? I love that answer. Thank you. Not just, I'm fine. Whatever. It's
a wonderful day to be alive, isn't it? I mean, we got things going on, but we persevere.
I love this purple thing that you have going on. I'm kind of envious, and I feel like I want to change my lighting, so I have some like ambiance. You're like very lavender haze right now. I feel like in the Taylor Swift era.
Yes, let's go with that. Let's go.
All right, so let's start off. I want to know about you beginning writing. When were you first writing, and then when did that turn into screenwriting?
Born and raised New Yorker, I started writing the moment I could. And I tell this story now to everyone, but that's only because I have hindsight and I just rediscovered the story. And that is remembering in third grade when I was in Romeo, or we were reading Romeo and Juliet, and then moved on to West Side Story. And I asked my teacher if there's a Black version, and she said no. And I got furious, and I started to steal, because I started to write like straight from West Side Story and just put Blacks instead of Hispanics and all of that. Right. Or sorry, Latinx. Apologies. Again, hindsight tells me that I was just looking for representation, but I think really I was really looking for engaging stories that made sense. Like both West Side Story and Romeo and Juliet felt so significant, yet I couldn't. It felt old at the same time. Like third grade me was like, this is crazy. What's going on here? I understand the importance, but it's not current. It's not modern. It doesn't reflect the life that I'm currently living in the playground at recess. And I just wanted to see that more and more. So I started writing at a very, very early age. And that a few years later, I started to really understand what screenwriting was, because from that point on, I didn't understand the difference between the person that was on screen saying the words and the person behind the scenes making the words. So I very much wanted to be a stand-up comedian and be like, the Wayans brothers or Martin or Seinfeld, and like be that face. And it wasn't until a few more years later that I was like, okay, writing is where I want to be. Creating is where I wanted to be. And it took me a long, long time to get there, starting again with plays because New York, and moving eventually into films and then landing in TV predominantly. I was just fortunate enough to be in schools where I kind of had that pathway. So I knew very early on, but it just took me a few years to get there properly.
It's funny to me that you're adding Black people into the stories and changing them. But I, as a third grader, was adding animals. So I ripped off The Secret Garden and wrote that story, but I put animals in it. It was a tiger, and I think a monkey or something, his friend, who found a secret door.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I needed representation too, you know what I mean?
Listen, remakes are big. Remakes are big. You might have something.
That made me laugh. I was just thinking about that. Okay, so what was your first job that actually felt like, okay, I'm in it. I'm in the mix?
I think everyone will say they were in play at school, which is true for me. But I think nothing made me feel more in it than, again, I always knew I wanted to be in this business. I didn't see a job that I didn't want to do, which is my problem. So as soon as I could, I became a PA. I became you know, and just kind of worked my way up in a production ladder, assistant producer, producer, etc. And I think in a very weird way, 9/11 has something to do with us, but this is a ridiculous story. People should not talk to me about anything. This is not how interviews should work. But I spent a lot of time networking, if you will, and building relationships with different production companies. And I had spent, again, a New Yorker who lived through 9/11. I spent a lot of time not ever being in the city on 9/11. Not out of superstition. It just kind of felt that way for about 10 years. And I was working on a fashion show for like Fashion Week, 10 years after 9/11. And I woke up really early. I think I was a PA. I had to get a production van. And it was awful work, like waking up at 4 o'clock to go get a van to then drive people around. Free food is always great. But 5 hours later, or you know, whatever it was, I'm standing in Grand Central Station and it's been completely transformed. And I had something to do with it. Now that's not writing, but it was a transformation of it all. Going from completely tired to having this new experience of feeling the city come alive in this moment that felt fresh for me, and then transforming an iconic landmark into something that served a purpose.
Was it like a runway? Did they do the fashion show through Grand Central Station?
Yeah, and it was incredible. It was incredible. Again, not writing, but there's the transformation of like, here's this ordinary thing, and we're going to make something really extraordinary out of it. That felt really significant for me to watch. And I felt a few of those points, but when you asked me that question, it was the first one that come to mind.
Yeah.
Again, transformation is I think the key of what we do. So I think it was fitting.
Yeah, I remember those moments too, of like walking onto a set and just being like, whatever set it is, it's still a set. And it's like, you're like, yes, this is space. This is where I belong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just that energy in there.
I spent I feel like I need to always say that I grew up in New York, but it's true. Grew up in New York and was, again, very lucky enough and fortunate enough to, when I moved to LA, became this bi-coastal person who, again, always working in production, again, whether that's fashion shows, movies, TV, whatever it was, I was there. And people used to ask me all the time, like, yeah, oh man, do you get to see celebrities? And I was like, oh man, these writers, like you know, the assistant director really worked that one shot. And I'm like nerding out on these like really small things. I think unless you're in the industry, you just don't really get why I'm nerding out about someone's like IMDb page, or like knowing that they boom operated like this one thing. It becomes really ridiculous and small. But I think much like our specifically my screenwriting career, it's all about those small moments. Those small moments make everything. I don't know why I started talking about this, Shayna.
No, I love it.
Cut me off.
No, I don't want to cut you off, because these are the wonderful nuggets that I think that I enjoy about watching interviews with people, is when those little nuggets come out. And I feel you, and I think a lot of people feel the same way about those little things that not everyone can identify with, you know?
Yeah.
So when you were working all of these jobs, and let's go through all these different jobs that you were working, what do you think you pulled from all of those that helped you in your writing?
So I think my situation was a little bit different than when I hear other people talk about a similar situation. Okay. In that when I got into production, first of all, production life or set life, hashtag set life, as everyone loves to call it, is awful. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend this career, to be perfectly honest. I stay far away from it. And that's not from my own leg up. It's like, it's not fun. You're working long hours. You're sometimes not getting paid appropriately. But mainly, I just had other responsibilities. I was taking care, like my sob story time. I was taking care of my family financially when my father passed away abruptly. So I had financial responsibilities at 16, 17, and for a few more years after that, where my money wasn't my own, my life wasn't my own, and I was, again, very, very fortunate to be in New York and be in LA and be able to follow productions around the states. But again, it's so isolating and it's so sad at times. But it's a really really negative answer maybe, but the thing that I learned the most was being in those trenches and finally understanding what people did. So like it was isolating, it was isolating, but the only people around me were people who were doing this job, and I had to figure out what they were doing for a couple of reasons. Job security, right? Like everyone keeps saying networking, and I like talking to people, so it's not networking to me, it's building those relationships.
Sure.
But I wanted to prove my value and be helpful for people above me, below me, horizontally, wherever. I wanted to prove value, but also it was important for me to know what other people did, because one production's AD is not another production's AD.
Right.
The mysterious role of a producer is not the same. A script editor on set is, it's just all of these nuances to these roles. Yeah. It's something that I certainly pulled away from, because I want to prove my value to the job that I was doing, but I also wanted to make sure, in terms of my writing, I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing to make the tightest script that I could. Because in my mind, it was always about trying to make something good that wasn't going to be crazy for budgets. Mm-hmm. And at least at the very beginning, I was very, very focused on the idea of like, I don't have a genre brain. I'm not a genre writer. I don't go into deep space. My mm-hmm. thing is very slice of life, everything. And I elevate it in other ways, but I felt secure in that. But I wanted to make sure that when someone picked up my script, they didn't just toss it out and go, nope, you have X, Y, and Z, and this is not going to be good for our budget, or like, there's no star vehicle here. And maybe that's just the neuroses of trying to, again, placate for the powers that be. But I wanted to make sure that I understood what people were after, maybe from a technical sense, because that's the only thing that's tangible, I suppose.
Yeah, because everything else is really subjective. And Correct. That's one thing that you can really, it's universal in terms of like, okay, someone's going to look at budget. Someone's going to look at if this is a star vehicle. Someone's going to look at how many characters you have. Somebody's going to look at how many locations you have. Like all this stuff. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I feel you on that. I worked in production for 20 years in reality TV before I kind of left. And yeah, it's a grind. It's a lot. I mean, there's great stories, but there's a lot of just like, what am I doing?
Yeah. And but that's also those same moments where you want to pull your hair out, especially reality TV, where it's again it's a different kind of slog than scripted, right? Like it's crazy. But those moments where you want to pull your hair out, I think you'll end up finding yourself at your desk going, oh, that was a really good character moment. Like it's a really good character moment.
Right? I've too many of those.
Yeah.
Too many of those, like some lady taking her shirt off and yelling at me. And I'm literally in my brain going like, this is great. Like she's crazy, but this is awesome. What is she going to say?
Yeah, right. I was in an airport earlier this week, and for the first time in my life, I saw a fight between passengers. They weren't on the plane. They were at the front, like just waiting. I don't know what they were doing. And I was so distracted trying to make up the story in my mind of like, what led this person to have a fight with this other person in an airport? Because that would frighten the crap out of me.
Yeah.
I don't know airport rules, but it seems like immediate arrest.
Right. Airport jail, wherever that is.
Correct. And I was like, oh, something seriously must have happened. Like this. Anyways, yes.
Yeah.
You get a little imaginative for sure.
We're always finding the story like, ooh, what really happened? Okay, so we segued a little bit, but I want to know, you said a little bit about what you write, that you write slice of life, but then you elevate it in other ways. Can you just talk a little bit about what your voice is, your vibe, what you write, what stories you gravitate towards?
This is taking a lot of reflection on my part, so I want all of the applause. But
comment.
earlier this year, I would have said, and I've been saying this for a couple of years now, that I write about identity. And usually that comes in the form of comedy dramas, in your way of like, a Rami or Insecure or these types of shows. But it's changing recently. I had a development exec ask me for. I sent them 2 scripts, and they said, "What else do you have?" And I was being really neurotic, so they sent this to me on email, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what else do I have? I have nothing else. Of course, I have other things." And just like jokingly to myself, I was like, "Let me give him one without death." And I didn't have it. I didn't have a script that didn't involve death in some way, shape, or form. In not in any kind of like sad way or crimey way. They were all very different kinds of death, but they were death. And I think I'm really trying to understand. Specifically my place in the world, but also collectively our place in the world. I used to sometimes say I write coming of age, except not the teen stuff. It's like, what does adult coming of age look like? Because I don't know. Because in movies and TV, it's all very straightforward. We got to get the cool job. We got to. I don't know why Devil Wears Prada comes to mind, but like we have to fly to Paris and do that fashion show, and like that's it. Or like we have to get married and that's it. And fortunately for me, I'm on that road. I'm living that life. And I'm like, what's next? Because media only tells me that I'm meant to be like, 60, 70, 80, and potentially, I don't know, go on a road trip to NFL. I don't know what that movie 80 for Brady was about. I have no idea. But I don't know what life is meant to be like until I get to like retirement age.
Sure.
So I'm constantly trying to figure that out. So like identity and coming of age, but also the things that excite me when I sit down to write is following the things that I fear the most, and that is death. That's I'm scared to not be alive, whether that's like physically not being alive or just like not feeling alive. I think that's really important as well, especially when you have kids and you're married and feeling alive in whatever way that actually means. That's something that scares me, and it's something that I want to look at, because I tend to think that I live a many a life. And when I tell people about things, they're like, "How old are you?" And I'm like, young enough, I think. Sorry, you asked me a very simple question, and this would never fly in a meeting.
Don't censor yourself. Go.
Generally speaking, I write adult coming of age projects about identity in whatever form. I write in a couple different genres, but nothing super duper elevated in as a genre writer.
That was a really lovely answer, and I love when people say what they write, and it makes me think about my own identity and my own coming of age. I can certainly relate. I mean, we both have little kids, and I think only now I'm coming out of the like little kid fog. And for many years, as you know, like you're just so-and-so's mom or so-and-so's dad.
Right.
You no longer have a name. You no longer have an identity. So when you come out of that, who are you? I think that's
who are you?
Just sort of like, who am I? Who am I, Trey? I don't know. So I love those stories, and continue to tell those stories and write those stories, because that's so important. We're not dead. We're not dead.
We're not dead.
We're just getting started. We're not the Golden Girls, like living in a retirement house at 50, just giving up, wearing our muumuus. We're doing stuff.
And don't get me wrong, that sounds great, but I'm not there yet.
I know. Some days that's me though. Some days I'm like, exactly. I'm done. All right. So what are your big goals? What's the big dream for you? Where do you want to go with this writing thing?
I'm trying to decide if I'm going to tell you the truth or not, if I'm being honest. Am I going to tell you the truth, or am I going to give you the short answer? The true answer is I'd love an empire of sorts. Having come from production, there's not a part of me that wants to leave that behind. I would love to start this production company that brings up voices, just voices, period. Because it's really, really hard. I want to be able to bring people along and share in that in those stories that I can't tell, stories that I can't think of, surrounding myself with smarter creators and smart people, while also, collecting my own accolades, being able to be far-reaching in different mediums. I definitely practice in different mediums, whether it's TV, podcasts, etc. And I want to continue that. But I think unfortunately there are still this is not breaking news, but there are a lot of gatekeepers who outwardly speak about gatekeeping and don't care about it. There are a lot of people who are completely fine with taking credit on their own. They're completely fine with people. There are people who are completely fine with not mentoring, not reaching out, not helping creators of, like, again, I'd love to say underrepresented voices, but I just mean any voices are different. Like any would be cool.
Yeah.
Because as much as I'm on social media and see photos of like 4 white guys, like, that's fun, but I've had my fill of that, and I'd love to just see something different happening. And I think when people in charge take those risks, it gets really exciting. And that may be for a small amount of people in comparison to everyone who wants to see a Disney movie, like a Marvel movie, for example, people who are going to make, shell out the $1 billion. But I feel like those are the things that I grew up on, those things that are really small. Like this is a terrible example, but I believe like Fight Club wasn't a box office movie, right? Like that may be incorrect, but it's movies like that we look at now fondly and like, oh man, we love that movie.
Yeah.
And
those culty movies that didn't do well in the theater.
Right. And like those are the things I love. Those are the things that make me really excited about creating. And like people like Robert Rodriguez, who I'm like, again, he's a wild man who is doing like 18 Spy Kids movies, but from where he came from, it's such a wonderful story. And I love people who start off small. And listen, it's still business. You got to eat. Whether or not he's passionate about Spy Kids, I don't know. I really hope that he is. But like, do whatever you got to do to continue to create and do your thing. But I do think the lack of opportunity for people the lack of opportunity is a thing that bugs me. I don't know where the question was, Shayna. I'm trying to circle back around. I don't even. I started ranting.
I know, but the big goal for you, the empire, the Trey Empire. I love it.
That's right. The empire. The
yeah,
empire.
I mean, you're right in wanting to bring people up and mentor and create an environment that voices that aren't being heard and stories that aren't being shared should be shared more. It's, we have to get out of just what's familiar and break out. So that makes me want to ask you, what are you watching right now? What do you like? What are your favorite TV shows, films that just like really excite you?
I'm going to answer your question, but before I do, let me just say, like, from a realistic point of view, my goal in the short term is just to work and get paid for the thing that I love doing.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that I'm also, I hate when people like give unrealistic, like just have interviews where it's super unrealistic or it just sounds delusional. And I'm trying really hard not to sound delusional.
I did not think you sound delusional. I think that you can have that big like dream. I mean, it doesn't mean that tomorrow it's going to happen, but you can have these bigger goals. That's why I was saying like the big goal. And then, you're getting there, but right now you want to work. I want to
work. Yeah, exactly. All right. Sorry, I'll answer your question. What am I watching now? I am really into, I'm having a bit of a renaissance of watching things.
Okay, good. I love it.
So I think commonly people will know things like Billions. I'm really into Billions right now. On a whim, started watching it with the wife, and it's amazing. And anyways, it's great. And there's a weird connection with Billions, so we started watching it. And How To with John Wilson? I want to say that's the name of the show. It's on HBO Max. At least that's how I watch it.
Okay.
Do you know Nathan Fielder? Like, he's done The Rehearsal and Nathan For You. And it's like these...
Don't put me on the spot. I don't know.
No,
I'm just kidding. I don't know anyone when someone asks me. I'm like, who? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know anyone. I don't know anything. Nothing.
you'll have it posted behind you and be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
So John Wilson, I believe Nathan Fielder also produces this show called How To with John Wilson, and I like it because it feels just like a neurotic person going through the world and kind of just talking to you about what he notices, and it's I would call it a satire. And Nathan Fielder has that same kind of vibe. If you haven't checked it out, please check it out.
I'm looking at it right now. It looks so. It's a docu series.
If you want to call it that, it lives in this like really gray area. It's definitely written.
Okay, so it's unscripted.
It's right. It's a weird gray area. I'm learning Japanese, so I am watching a lot of anime shows and movies, which is really, if I can give any kind of advice, please branch out to movies and TV shows that are not located in the United States.
Yeah.
I'm only recently learning this lesson, and while I've had exposure to world cinema and world TV, if you want to call it that, I haven't really immersed myself in it. So I'm doing that now with Japanese TV and movies, but also with Indian films and Korean films, and I'm trying to be as far-reaching as possible, talking about these amazing African movies that are out, and it's just
Cool.
it's wild to kind of feel like I'm rediscovering or catching up. You know how when someone's like, "Oh yeah, the '90s were great. Let me share my 5 favorite movies from of the '90s," and there's like 1 or 2 you may not have seen but you probably heard of. I feel like there's that, but for these different countries that I'm just in the deep end. I don't know enough to be an expert on it, but I'm excited for the way other people tell stories, because it's given me ideas for how to tell stories and break things out that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't immersing myself in that. So more than like going to the Criterion Collection, like really, please do yourself a favor and watch other things. And it may not be your thing, but don't be afraid of it.
That's amazing. That's such good advice. I need to do that. I got to get out of my samesies. Let's just talk a little bit about ISA. When did you first become involved with ISA? How are you how are you with us? How do we know you?
That's a great question. So, in the last 5 years, maybe, I've spent a lot of time doing I guess a screenwriter rediscovery.
Okay.
Really, really, I had a few scripts that I was like these are it. I've graduated from like, maybe this is good, maybe this is not so good, to like, I've got bangers in the bank. And I spent a lot of time. That sounds crazy. No, I do have bangers in the bank. Call me, people. But I spent a lot of time getting those scripts into really fine order, and then reaching out to people, and then like properly being in to be perfectly honest, being in a position to apply to paid screenwriting contests or fellowships or whatever it is. Like there's a bunch of lovely free ones. There's a bunch of really, really great paid ones. And ISA has always been that thing in the background, for me anyway. Like it's always been a tab on my, my Safari or my Google Chrome, where it's like, these are the resources that I'm going to go to when I can, one, be confident enough to pursue it properly, because that's a huge barrier besides the money of things. Not when I say money of things, I don't mean ISA specifically, but I mean just of the world of getting into things.
Everything.
And yeah, I just felt confident with the script and really got into, I guess, the ISA world, and was lucky enough, I can't stress enough, lucky enough to have been recognized for a script, and spoke with the team, and it was really, really great. And shared some stuff out that I had been working on, and I want to say poof, here I am. But poof, here I am. Like there was a lot of work to get to this point.
Movie poof, like poof.
Movie poof, right. It's been about the recognition of the work that I put in. So like, one thing led to another, and I entered. I'm pretty sure it was a diversity fellowship, I want to call it, on ISA, and that I took a chance because, and I don't think I've ever told anyone this. I submitted a script to ISA that I didn't submit to anywhere else. It was an ISA exclusive.
Yeah.
And I don't know what led me to do that, but it was a script that I feel personal about all of my scripts, but I felt like I needed to test waters. I feel like I needed to see where I landed. And I don't know what exactly made me go to ISA with this script, but I was like, if I hear anything back, great. If I don't, I don't. And I was selected for it. And it was a huge, even now, I think I very rarely show people that script. And it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's personal. And again, when it comes to confidence, I'm a great writer. I don't mean that any other way of like, I am good. Whether or not people are going to get to see that, it's a different story. And sorry, side note, the one thing I've learned is that it's always about who's reading your script and not necessarily about your level of competence, if you will. True. Because we've seen a lot of bad TV and movies get made, make a lot of money and all this and all that. But sorry, let me get back on track.
And then are you currently on the top 25 writers to watch this year?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, good.
But it's always great to say. I put it everywhere I possibly can. It's amazing. Again, the recognition is a huge deal. Someone asked me recently about like what, the moments that I'm most proud of, and I say this to be quite honest. I don't think ISA doesn't. No one has to do anything. Let's be clear, right? But to again be recognized by an organization that is reading tons of scripts a day, let alone throughout the year, and to be picked upon, to be in one of the 25 spots of the year is huge, and it's been great. Again, proud moment of the year, if not for the community, for the career,
for all times.
For all
times. So almost done, but I wanted to know I'm curious to know how you write. What's your process? Ooh. Are you an outliner, like fully outlined? Do you have everything right now before you get on the final draft or whatever software you use? Or are you like a dabbler? Do you write the first, like what's your process? How do you write?
How do I write? It changes. It has changed. And I feel like what I have now is what I will stick with because it's worked the best. I used to have something really rough. If you want to call it an outline, sure. Mm-hmm. And there were definitely holes. Like if you ask me what happened in the second act, I can give you a little bit of this, a little of that, but I wouldn't be able to articulate it in the best way. And I found that if it were a show, I could make it to the finish line, but it wasn't packing the punch. Mm-hmm. So I would spend a lot more time rewriting, and I hated rewriting. Notice I'm using past tense here. My newer process is 100% being probably not as I guess planned as other people, but I definitely have an outline. If I can get away with it, I know my scene headings, or I know what a scene is meant to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying something a little bit newer now, where I'm actually writing a lot of my promo materials beforehand, right? So I'm writing my one sheet, I'm doing my decks already, because I feel like that's information that I should already know. And if I don't know it, I need to work it out on what I call like scrap paper, which is just a Google Doc.
Yeah.
And figure that out before I get to final draft, which I do use.
Yeah.
And Highland, I'm actually agnostic, if I'm using that word properly. I am all over the place. Ask me about any software, and I'm pretty sure I know it or have used it. Anyways, so I don't do cards. I don't have a treatment of sorts. I have my version of a treatment. I have learned that a lot of these words, like treatments and outlines and all this, is so personal to the writer that even now I'm like, I don't do this. I just do my version of it. I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing it out to someone unless I know that they can understand that my mess of a doc is almost like for personal eyes only. It's not meant to be commercialized in any way, shape, or form. But it works for me. So when I'm in a final draft, and it works so well, even when I'm in bed and I'm like, oh, I just can't go to sleep, or like the scene is bugging me and I really want to get to it. I can start writing in a blank Google Doc sheet, Google Docs page, and I'm following the exact outline that I have. So when I eventually transfer it over to Final Draft, it works just about fine. I'm doing very minimal edits. And I've embraced, because of that, I can embrace rewriting and have the most fun rewriting, where I can change things. And of course, it'll have this ripple effect where I am changing large chunks of scenes or acts and all of that stuff. But it becomes a playground all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And the vomit, not the vomit draft, but like the solid first draft of this is the stuff I'm trying to get out the way. I'm just trying to write it so I can then rewrite it, because it's so juicy to go, oh man, I know there's going to be this is not what happens in anything that I write, but I know there's going to be a murder on this page, and how cool would it be if like this traits of this character is already working up to that, right? Like,
right.
I don't have to explain foreshadowing to anyone, but but there's so many different, I suppose for me, the things that I love the most in the media that I consume is not unlike social media. Sorry, just a quick side note here of like an Instagram reel where they're like, it's a tutorial, right? So they're kind of starting off halfway through, and then by the time you get to the end of it, you realize the end of it is really the beginning of it. Whoa! Does that sound like any movie we've ever watched? Like, of course it does. And like, those are the things that are so great, is that if we can learn, if we can, I guess, relearn, right? Because again, we've seen this in other movies, but I made that connection just today, actually, so I'm smart. But but if we can really start to plant those seeds ahead of time, where people then watch it or even read it on the if we're lucky, they're watching on the second or third time,
right?
And picking up those things, small or not small. Those are the things that I'm grasping for. I'm grasping for people to have like a deeper understanding. Yes, she chose the black dress because of X, Y, and Z. Like it's nerdy. It's super nerdy, but hey.
No, I'm into that. I'm into the like second and third watch, where you're like, you're not going to see it the first time, but if you go back, you're going to pick up those little breadcrumbs and understand better. And that's a different level of storytelling, in a sense, you know, where you're like, whoa, where you're watching movies and see something different.
I've definitely hated movies on the first watch, and I would talk to someone about it, and they'd be like, "Oh, but did you not get X, Y, and Z?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about, you idiot?" And then I go back and watch it, and I'm like, "Oh, this is so good."
Yeah.
But so again, going back to like reading scripts and it being so subjective, like it's so easy to just read your 30, 60, whatever many pages, and completely miss everything that you're writing. And understand, oh, this is a basic love story and like blah blah, and people aren't picking up the nuance on it. We all do it. We all passively watch things, so actively watching or reading, and the joy that I've been having lately is making the choice to be active in my watching or reading, and it's I think it's helped me out loads. Again, I'm just setting off on tangents here. Shayna, shut me up. Shut it down. Just close the window.
No, I'm actually having fun with your tangents. But I guess I'll kind of wrap it up. What you already gave some great nuggets of advice, but is there any other advice, you know, besides watching other worldly cinema and TV and stuff? Is there any other advice that you would share, or anything that you've learned along the way that for maybe new screenwriters or people that are kind of trying to find their way?
Yeah, I am so lucky. If I haven't said it before, guys, I was born and raised a New Yorker, which meant
where were you born and raised?
Nueva York, and I am I perform again. I knew this from a long time ago, and yes, I acted, but I say perform because improv has been the thing that I have been most consistent with.
Mm.
And I've been lucky enough to do it with some really, really great people. And the phrase that has stuck with me forever has been "follow the fun." And it's something I carried on with my writing, and it worked. It works. I think it works really, really well. And people usually say things like "write what you know," which I didn't like. I just don't like. I just don't like that. It doesn't resonate with me in any way, shape, or form. Because writing what I know is not fun.
Yes.
But following the fun
Very
is fun.
limiting. Very limiting. Not that you're
It's
not that you don't have a big life. I'm just saying,
no,
like,
no.
right, what only we know is like so limiting.
I agree with this. When people started to recognize the things, recognize my scripts, the things that I felt like was a theme, again, besides the deaths, was following the fear. I follow my fear into something that that I needed to explore. Like I'm exploring it in a way because I have a genuine interest in it, right? So I often tell people to follow the fun or follow the fear. If you can do both, that's fantastic. But you have to lean in and really go for it, because that's going to be the thing that's going to bounce off the page. That's going to be voice. If you ask me, that's like the voice is like that thing that you're most excited about that makes it so palpable on the page. And it's been the thing that's helped me out loads. And I know that's a really vague, like vague phrase, very vague phrases, but I do think that in my mind it opens it up a lot more than write what you know, because I'd rather sometimes write what I know in the way of what I don't know.
Right, but it makes sense to me. Follow the fun or follow the fear. Those are generally two places that we tend to we go, no one's gonna get that.
Mm,
I don't want to push the envelope. I'll stay safe. So it's like breaking out of the safety, and you don't want to follow the fear because it's hard. It's difficult.
it's hard. Yeah.
Pain is difficult. Fear is difficult. But if
Yeah.
you push your limits and go there and go to places that you're not comfortable with, then that's where the magic is.
I think that's exactly right. And to just be as super clear as possible, just because I write, I don't necessarily write genre.
Mhm.
I have scripts about family. I have scripts about like that's a murder mystery. I have scripts that are about, you know, show business, because why not? But like I'm not limiting myself to. I think people think slice of life, and people don't always think of the stakes that come with those things.
Mhm.
And I just want to be clear that I am not talking about not making it impactful or following something that's scary in terms of horror, or scary in terms of or fearful in terms of like danger, because those
Yeah.
all have a place in all the stories, but they don't have to.
Yeah.
And following the fun doesn't necessarily mean let's do this road trip with grandpa's ashes, because if that's what you want to write, great, but it doesn't have to mean that. And there are so many different facets and so many different perspectives on all these things that again, just to quickly go back to what I was saying before, of like, this is why I think it's important to allow people to take those risks in the media that we are able to make, because I do think we end up watching a bunch of the same things, and then we end up making a bunch of the same things. And it's not, again, I'm still, I was gonna say I'm very old. I'm not very old, but considering how long I've been wanting to do this professionally, I feel like I'm old. And I'm still learning the different kinds of like what a genre is.
Yeah.
And the ways to play with it that isn't all of the different ways that we continually see and get tired of. There's, again, nothing wrong with any of it. Anyways, I feel like I've talked myself to death.
Well, you're lucky, because if you're dead, then we're done. But yeah, I think we are finished. I think that this was such a fun conversation. So thank you for joining me and chatting with me and talking about yourself and your writing and your world and everything. It was super fun.
Can we do one next time where I just ask you a bunch of questions? That would be
Sure, you want to
fantastic.
flip it?
I'm sure I'll find a way to talk about me and be really long-winded, but
I always find a way to talk about me in these interviews. What are you talking about? It's fine. I always have to throw myself in there. I'm like, hello, I'm here too.
we can keep going. We can keep going. We can make this 3 hours. We can make this the director's cut. There we go.
This is part one. We'll be back for part two, where we talk about more weird stuff. All right. Weirder the better. Let's go. All right. Well, that is all. Thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.